My name's Victoria Coates, and I'm the Vice President of the Davis Institute for National Security at the Heritage Foundation.
Victoria, thank you so much for the time with the Media Line. You're in Israel. You have had an extensive background in defense and foreign policy. Israel is still in a war on 7 fronts. You just wrote a book that really deals with what happened after October 7th. What's on your mind?
Well, thank you, Felice. The battle for the Jewish state, how Israel and America can win, is a sort of history of, first, what happened after October 7th, because I think a lot of Americans were befuddled by what happened. It seemed natural and right that Israel would respond to the folks who had attacked them so brutally, and that America would stand with Israel. And instead, what we saw were these extraordinary demonstrations in favor of Hamas in America. These weren't on the Arab street. This was here in the United States, and it was students who had been pre-programmed by their professors to be sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. And that's something I went through in the first chapter of the book, is where did all this come from in academia? You know, what is this ideology that our students are largely being taught? And it's called settler colonialism, and it comes first for Israel, but second it comes for the United States. So this is something we have to deal with, not just Israel.
How can Israel and America win this battle?
Well, the good news is that Israel has won every actual battle waged against it since the establishment of modern Israel in 1948. I think where we made a mistake was after the War of Independence, the 67 war, the 73 war, that we didn't just announce that Israel had won, that this wasn't some kind of stalemate or truce. This was an Israeli victory, that they had defeated all of the nation states that had arrayed against them, and that the nation states themselves were going to stop doing it because it was expensive and they lost and they didn't like it. But the problem is nobody actually did that declaration. It's a little bit what Ambassador Dermer was talking about in his remarks at the JNS conference, is that we have to get to victory here. So this isn't a negotiation between two equal parties. This is a victor, declaring terms. And as he said, we can be magnanimous in victory, but it has to be clear that there's a winner and a loser, or else the conflict will go on forever. It's now half a century since the last real war against Israel, a nation-state war against Israel, and we're still here. We're still stuck in this artificial construct that the Palestinians are something that they're not.
You have a personal note in terms of a prelude to your book that ties to your grandfather. Tell us about it.
Well, my grandfather was in the Army in World War II. He was a captain for an element of the Army that supported the 80th Airborne as they came into Normandy on D-Day. And he knew that not only did he have his young bride at home when he stormed up Utah Beach, but that my mother was 6 months old. So he did that knowing he had a tiny baby he had seen once for one day, and that what he saw on that day, and that he very likely might not come home and see her again, but he did it because he knew he had to do it. And then he got an anti-aircraft gun under his command as a captain, and he named it the Baby Ann after her, and he put her little pink shoes over the gunnel. So she was out hunting Nazis from a very early age, and the stories he had, and he really didn't talk about the war until the end of his life, particularly about going and becoming the installed mayor of a town in Alsace-Lorraine where there had been an atrocity and there was a mass grave. And he made the locals who had done it dig up the victims and give them proper burial and put up a monument to them, and the monument is still there.
Victoria, why has Israel over and over failed to tell its case of why it needs to exist?
Well, that's part of why I wrote the book. I feel there are various attempts at this, but there are a lot of stereotypes and falsehoods that this is the settler colonial thing, that these are folks from outside who don't have a right to the land, that the land was stolen, and that it was purely a response to the Holocaust, that the Jews do not have a historic tie to the Holy Land, all of which is ridiculous. But, this is a faraway place, and I think the American people need to hear this from an American perspective.
It was the end of President Trump's first term. You're appointed to head the Middle East network, the broadcasting network. You're not even there a couple of weeks. You're fired by President Biden. What actually happened?
Well, that was one of my more interesting experiences. I was asked, there were a group of us who were asked to head the independent news. They're solely funded by the Congress, but they're independent 501c3s that are part of the United States Global Media Agency, USAGM, which is now being headed by Brent Bozell. And Middle East Broadcast Network, MBN, was established after 9/11 to be a conduit of information from the United States to the Middle East, but it was in a way set up for failure. They can only broadcast in Arabic. They don't allow translation of their programming, so Americans can't see what their dimes are paying for, and it's a lot of dimes. It's hundreds of millions of dollars. Studios in Dubai, and I think we had 5 regional studios. The concept is good to get the truth out. The name of the Iraqi network, Al-Hura, means truth. But at the same time, it was not structured to seem transparent. And so my goal was to go in and try to change that. We were going to try to rebrand all of these as Voice of America franchises, be like Radio Free Europe during the Cold War, and reorient them to a counter-China mission. And as you said, although I had a 2-year contract approved properly, accepted by Congress, the Biden people fired all of us on January 20th. And so we looked into suing over it, but it was going to take years, and the government has limitless pockets, and I needed to get on with my life after the admin. But it was an interesting move into your world for a couple of weeks, and to learn about one of the things that, I mean, boy, is this thing right for Doge, because it had a mission after 9/11. It has drifted horribly from that mission and gotten way oversized, and in many ways, puts out anti-American information, or publishes programming that is counter to our interests, that's even offensive to local audiences. So it does no good. So I think this is the kind of model we need to change.
Do you feel there's room for this kind of, and I don't mean the same Al-Hura, the same mistakes, but room for some kind of media outlet that is going to speak into the Arab world so that you can try to change dynamics?
I think there should be. I mean, the Middle East is an inherently conservative sort of community, and what they're getting is a lot of very, very liberal, very woke programming from BBC, Sky Arabia, all of these things, and from, unfortunately, the USAGM networks. So I think you could get a good response, and I do think, given the propaganda efforts of the Russian and Chinese governments, there is potentially an information role for the United States government, but we need it to be completely transparent about what it, and unapologetic about what it is.
So I want to bring it full circle. Is media driving policy today, or is policy driving media?
I think maybe they're driving each other crazy. I think that communications is key. We have to be able to get our points out, and at the Heritage Foundation, we are doing that through our sister organization, the Daily Signal. I'm very proud. We have a reporter, Virginia Allen, with us as well, reporting as you are on the conference, and getting a lot of content back for our 500,000 Heritage members who are deeply interested in these issues, and they're just not finding this information on legacy media at home.
You also had a hat dealing with energy. You were in Saudi Arabia. We're back to issues concerning oil and gas. Where does America stand today in terms of the wars, in terms of relationships with Saudi Arabia pertinent to energy and oil?
I think could be a golden age for the U.S.-Saudi alliance, which is now 80 years young. And the thing is, the 3 big energy producers in the world, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and the United States now, 2 of them are great and good allies. And they are a cartel, we are a free system, but with our combined production capacity, we can do a lot together to make sure global energy markets are stable, are well sourced, and reasonably priced. And so that's why it is so deeply dangerous to think about Iran getting a nuclear weapon, which was one of our major topics here, because if they get one of their first targets with a small tactical nuclear device might be Saudi energy facilities. And that would be a catastrophe. We don't need that product anymore, but the rest of the world does. And if that capacity gets knocked out, then everybody's energy becomes enormously more expensive. And we can mitigate some of that, but certainly not all of it. And so that's why that's a domestic issue for the United States, not just, an international issue.
Victoria, you've got a lot on your plate. What are you waking up to tomorrow?
Tomorrow we are starting out bright and early with Virginia at the City of David to look at the archaeological discoveries that do prove physically the connection, the 3,000-year connection between the Jewish people and this very special strip that we call the Holy Land. So it's going to be a packed day in Jerusalem. Can't wait.
Victoria Coates, thank you so much for your time at the Media Line.
Thank you, Felice.